What is up? Today we are going to be talking about ball storage and how to actually test for ball storage effects yourself, because there have been a couple people recently who have had interest in testing stuff, and there's a lot to take into account that we didn't know about until I think December 2024. So yeah, I'll basically get you up to speed. There's a lot of points here, but I think when you see an example of me actually testing ball storage effects, which I'll do later, you'll see that it's not so complicated, but there is a lot to keep in mind. So, ball storage, you know what it is, right? Like, pause during SpongeBob's upgraded ball detonation, and then you warp somewhere else, and there might be an effect, there might be a crash, there might be no effect, So basically, we need to get through all these, but I will be playing on ZEMU as well, sometimes. So first of all, the only versions where you can actually test it are on English, Xbox, and PS2. You can't do it on anything else. Not GameCube, it just got patched, and not any non-English versions of the game. So it can only be English Xbox or English PS2, which includes PAL English. But 360 and PS3 can still do it. It's just that obviously it's the Xbox and PS2 version. But if you play on these consoles, it'll still work, including the PS3 digital version. Number 2, only non-SpongeBob levels can be tested. Corruption comes from Bob's model not being loaded into the level. So what that basically means is that there are some levels that, shouldn't ever get effects. I mean, it shouldn't be possible anyway. So non-SB means non-SpongeBob levels, and what counts as a non-SpongeBob level? SpongeBob has his own I think it's like PLY4, PLS4, I don't know, yeah, PLS4, I think, is his model. I don't know, it's something like that, right? If his, there's a list of levels in the game's INI and what characters can actually be, loaded into it. And there are some levels where SpongeBob isn't even, loaded into them. So, for example, Frogfish is a non-SpongeBob level, and the reason why it's a non-SpongeBob level is because SpongeBob is not loaded in. If you hacked in a Portahead into Frogfish and didn't change anything else, it would not be able to switch to SpongeBob. How could it? He's not loaded in. You'd have to, put in his model ID or whatever for it to actually work. However, I'm Ready Depression, even though you load into the level as Patrick, it is still a SpongeBob level, because there is a Portahead, and if you enter the Portahead and use it, it switches you to SpongeBob, so SpongeBob is loaded in. So, here's every single level that is a non-SpongeBob level, right? Every sliding and driving level, every floating block challenge, which there are 3 of, Plank Combat, because Patrick is loaded into that one. That's the only combat arena where Patrick is loaded into it. And then Frogfish and Dennis 1. That is everything that can have a ball storage effect. So, yeah. But obviously, you need to set a ball storage, in SpongeBob levels, obviously, but yeah, so Conchain Bob levels is point number 3. So for example, if you did no cheese to 3K to Rock Slide, because Rock Slide is an applicable level, for ball storage effects, that is effectively the same as 3K to Rock Slide. Because what causes the corruption in the first place is that, okay, so the game writes to memory, right? But, it stores upgraded ball's detonation into SpongeBob's, player model. But if you load into a level where SpongeBob's player model isn't, you can't switch to it, it's not loaded in, that means that the game doesn't know what to do with this, so it just writes it to memory. So it just a bunch of gobbled mess, whatever, data corruption, whatever, into memory. I think what it's generally doing is just switching over a couple zeros to ones and vice versa. I don't know, but yeah, So if you go from no cheese, like set up ball storage and no cheese, and then warp to 3K, well, it's just been assigned to SpongeBob's player model, so ball storage is technically active, but it can't do anything. And by warping to 3K, like, ball storage is still, like, active. It just can't, it can't do anything in the short term. So it would just be, 3K to rock slide with an extra load. Number 4, you can infinitely chain. So, for example, 3K to rock slide, you could theoretically do 3K to rock slide, 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 and so on. You can absolutely do that, and it'll just shift the corruption. So, well, I guess I gotta go to number 5 now. The load count is very important when you're doing testing, because of the rule of 4 and memory leak, right? So, unrelated to ball storage, the game leaks a little bit of memory every single load, because the game is incredibly well made, thank you for asking. It just leaks a little bit of memory every load. However, every 4 loads, it leaks a little extra memory. Just a little more, but that's enough to obviously make a difference with ball storage. So the reason why chaining a level again and again and again can produce a different result is because the memory leakage is causing that memory to shift a little bit. Well, it's causing the corruption to shift a little bit in memory. And every 4 loads, it'll do it a little extra. So what this means is that when doing testing, you want to begin like a level on a non-multiple of 4, because statistically, like, we're trying to think of like how to apply these effects, these theoretical effects, into a run setting, right? And obviously, statistically, you are more, obviously this isn't literally exactly how it works, but effectively, 3/4 of the time, 3/4 of the time, you're not going to be getting that extra memory leakage, which means that statistically, technically, for testing these effects, if we could actually find an effect in a level like Rockslide, statistically, if we went to it in a run, it would probably, like, if we loaded into Rockslide an extra time at some point, there is technically a 3 in 4 chance that we would be on a non-multiple of 4 loads, which makes it more realistic for we're trying to, like, obviously, again, it's just a thing of, like, being consistent with, like, how it would most likely be done with the runs. You don't have to do it like that, though. Like, you can start a level on a multiple of 4. It's just that the testing done so far has not been done with that, with very few exceptions. So generally, at least for now, you don't really want to do that. And what I mean by starting on a load count of 4, by the way, is that, like, let's say you loaded a save file into 3K, right? So that's load number 1. Then you just warped to, like, SCDA, that's load number 2. Then you loaded into no cheese, that's load number 3. Then, if you set up ball storage and went from no cheese to rock slide, that rock slide is the 4th load. That is when that memory leakage actually matters. And you'd be beginning the chain on a 4th load. You don't want that for ideal testing. In future, that should probably be tested, but for right now, again, it's not, like, realistic or ideal relative to a run setting. So, well, another way of thinking of it is, like, well, actually, it's a point I made later, but you basically want to, like, you want to, like, load a file, and then, like, pretty much as soon as you reasonably can, like, start the chain, effectively. I mean, that's what I was doing for my testing, but again, it's just so that, we're just being more consistent with the testing, so that we can test each other's effects that we found and stuff like that, just makes things easier for everyone. Number 6, costumes can change outcomes. That is right, you can get completely different effects with costumes. You could get similar effects, you could get identical effects, you could get no effect. So, I don't know how it changes memory, but it changes memory a little bit. So what this means is that when testing ball storage, it is also important to at least consider Mermaid Man costume and Plain Sponge costume. Patrick's costumes do not affect anything. And there is a cheat code extra called SpongeGar. a cheat code costume called SpongeGar, but, you know, why would... There's, like, no cheat... Like, because that would only apply to cheat categories, and even then, a lot of cheat categories don't even bother with the sliding and driving level. It's just, like, a thing of just don't even bother. So the only ones that matter are Mermaid Man and Plain Sponge. Mermaid Man is the second extra. It is the second one. Plain Sponge, I think, is the 41st extra? Yeah, it's the 41st extra, I'm 99% sure. So there are, there are some situations where it's not really, like, it's either just straight up not worth testing an area because you just wouldn't have Plain Sponge by then no matter what, or it would only benefit, like, 100% and not other categories, which means that it's not as efficient for testing. Technically, you want to be testing stuff that affects the highest number of categories first. I mean, of course, you could do whatever you want, you know, whatever makes it, you know, the most fun for you, but again, I'm talking, like, as efficiently as possible. But generally, Mermaid Man is a really good one to test because, like, even from, like, sandwich driving onwards, like, there's, like, a 0-second extra from sandwich driving that you can literally just pick up, and there's a 0-second extra in Weenie, there's a 0-second extra in Sundae, so it's just, you know, but yeah, we are mainly testing with, like, the regular, just default outfit for, I say, you know, for SpongeBob. Like, obviously, in Nochi, SpongeBob has, like, well, because SpongeBob has, like, he has, like, technically his own costume in, like, Depression, but we can't really do anything about that, so, you know. No Cheese, he has, like, a slightly different, well, I don't know if they count as costumes, but, yeah. Again, that doesn't really matter. Alright, so number 7, you should use Zemu for Xbox, but you can't use PCSX2 for PS2. Zemu, with more recent versions, is actually accurate, and you definitely want to test on Zemu if you are looking for Xbox testing, right? Because you can test way faster. Like, if you crash on console, you need to, like, reach over to your console, turn it off, turn it back on, wait for it to boot up, and sift through everything, right? I have set up my ISO for Zemu in a way where, well, I've deleted all of the FMVs, which means that I get to the main menu as fast as possible, but that's not the only reason. The loads are way faster, but that's still not the only reason. Save states. Save states are a godsend, dude, because, like, there are some levels they want to test a lot of loads on. I'm talking for some of them, like, 40 or more. So, you know, if you crash on, like, the 27th load, then obviously, you know, but if you save stated on the 20th load, then at least, you know, you just save so much time. And think about, like, if you did extensive testing, even filled out one page where, like, a lot of the results are crashed, like, you save so much time off your for your life, and then you can spend that time testing more ball storage effects. Hip hip hooray. But anyway, yeah, so Zemu is actually, like, accurate. PCSX2 is not. Like, we've tried it, dude. Like, it has, like, completely different effects. It does not tackle memory the same way. It is completely unusable for testing. I think there are other PS2 emulators, but I highly doubt they're good. Like, if you're testing on PS2, you should probably just test on console. But testing on console, if whatever you're testing crashes a lot, is not ideal. This is the final reason why you would preferably do it on emulator. There is not, like... Okay, so, well, this was, like, a while ago, but basically, TLDR, one of my consoles doesn't turn on anymore, and it only had issues with that, after I just kept crashing repeatedly testing ball storage effects on Xbox. So, yeah, my first ever Xbox, a Crystal Xbox, mind you, it was having issues turning on because of it, and then one day it actually just straight up died, and I was only ever getting problems after continuous crashing, which was only happening from ball storage, so, yeah. Yeah, that's basically it. That's why you should test on console, ideally. You can test on, like, hard drive Xbox if you want, or, you know, 360 hard drive, or PS2 hard drive, like, you can do that. There's nothing, like, different about it other than faster loads, but at that point, might as well just play on Zemu. Alright, number 8, be logical and efficient. So, again, this is what I was talking about earlier. the sliding and driving tasks thing is important, because some people have said, like, what should I even test, right? And here's the thing. Every sliding and driving task can have its own effect. However, in a run setting, you are not going to get ball in most categories before Now That We're Men, before 20 tokens. So, and again, there are a couple cheat categories, but it really is only a couple, and even then, like who cares? So, like, there's no point in testing the first sandwich driving token, the first task. There's just no point. It's just completely inefficient. That would be like a last, like, that'd be like your last possible option, like desperation move. Like, we've tested literally everything else. Like, please, for the love of God, like, just don't bother with that stuff, like, seriously. Because this stuff is time consuming. That's another thing you gotta learn, is that this stuff is time consuming, and if you're spending it on the first sandwich driving task, then it's like, you know. But yeah, so, and then obviously, like, I mean, there are some tasks, like, Rubber Dub isn't that ideal to test because a Rubber Dub skips stuff. So it's only really Rubber Dub Ring they'd want to test. And then, you know, the first, like, weenie task, again, you don't have ball. Yeah. So there are ones that are more efficient to test than other ones, like, Weenie Time Challenge, for example. Knucklehead's first task, I mean, you can, but then that would only really benefit, like, all tokens at 100%, so again, it's like, you absolutely can do that, and I have tested levels that would only really benefit 100% in all tokens. It's just, again, it's like, you just gotta keep it in mind. So, and that's another thing with, like, costumes as well. Like, I figured out recently that one of the very worst ones that you can test is Sandwich Driving Time Challenge with the Plain Sponge costume, because not only does that can only 100% do it, there's significant routing restrictions in 100% where you can move Sandwich Driving 1 or 2 to later in the run. You can. It would just in itself lose time, so it would be inconvenient, but you still could move Sandwich Driving much later in the run. So, you know, stuff like that, it's like, I will test that eventually, but obviously is not ideal. Another thing as well is that you should only really be testing as many loads as, like, a theoretical effect would actually, like, save time in a run. Like, let's say you're doing a floating block, right? It's like, oh, maybe I like, load into floating block, and then, like, I don't know, like, the token moves towards me or something like that. That'd be, I don't know. Like, let's say that's possible. If it takes, like, 50 loads until that happens, that would obviously not save time in a run, so it's not worth testing. So, yeah. Like, it's, well, I was gonna show the spreadsheet, later, but, like, you can see here, I usually do notes for these, and I said here for at least Weenie Ring, the maximum number of loads worth testing is about 35-ish. So I only really tested roughly about 35 loads, because even if we did find an effect for load 40, well, what good is that gonna do, you know what I mean? Because at that point it doesn't save time. It'd be a good proof of concept, but we already have kind of proofs of concepts anyway, so, you know. But yeah. Number 9, death/scene resets, initial cutscenes. So, for initial cutscenes, every sliding and driving level, like, has its own, like, cutscene at the beginning, and whether or not you've seen... there's also cutscenes for, Frogfish, Dennis 1, and Dennis 2, but Frogfish... Oh, and... Well, yeah, those are the only ones that are applicable, that matter. For Frogfish and Dennis... Well, actually, Dennis 2 doesn't matter either. Frogfish's cutscene will always play when you reload the level. Dennis 1's doesn't. But whether or not you've seen the initial cutscene could cause, like, a crash or a different effect. The best example that I have seen is in Rubber Dub. There was one before where, like... Well, it's not even just cutscenes, actually, but yeah, I've had effects where it's like... I say effects, crashes, where it's like... if you've seen the cutscene, it won't crash, but if you haven't seen the cutscene, it will crash and stuff like that, you know. Like the initial fly-through cutscene when you first load into the level. Doesn't really matter for Rubber, but, you know, it matters for, like, Sundae and Desc and stuff. Oh, another thing about being logical and efficient, by the way. If you were going to test, for example, Sundae 1, like the first Sundae driving task, why would you set a bowl storage in, like, Dennis 2? Because you can't go to Dennis, you know, that's another thing as well, like, to think about it in, like, a run setting. You can't test, like, because, like 3K to Rockslide, for example, could have its own effect compared to No Cheese to Rockslide. It, you know, it writes to memory in a different way. So that's, you know, so, yeah. There's other things as well that can cause, like, effect. So, you know, like, the targets in Rubber, I had an issue before where if I didn't destroy the targets in Rubber, I would crash very early into the level, which was very strange. Sometimes you just can't realistically account for stuff like that, you know. I mean, for all we know, collecting extras could change an outcome because you've already, like, played through the level and already collected stuff. It's like, we just don't know. So don't take that into consideration, like, too much, but if you are testing, like, loading a level over and over again in something like Sundae or Desc, it's probably better to have already seen the cutscene before starting testing, but it's up to you if you want to test that or not. Number 10, reset with each chain attempt. Don't accidentally break the chain. So, for example, for a chain attempt, don't go to, like, after you're done testing, like, Rockslide, like, you load to it, like, 30 times, and there's just, like, there's nothing there, like, worth noting. You're not just gonna be like, okay, well, now I'm gonna test, Plank to Rockslide, and just don't reset the game. Again, for consistency's sake, and to make everything, you know, again, consistent, and just making sure we're all on the same page, you wanna, after you're done testing, you wanna reboot the game. On OG, if you hold the start and select button for 3 seconds, it'll soft reset. So that's a good way of quickly resetting on console. And if you have a modded Xbox, you can, like, create shortcuts to reset even faster. But yeah, you just want to, like, load a save file, like, to the level of choice, you know, set a bowl storage in that area, and then go to the destination. And obviously don't accidentally break the chain. If you accidentally, like, get rid of your bowl, then that's it. It's just gone. And that's effectively the same thing as just resetting the chain attempt. Number 11, spreadsheet demonstration plus bowl storage examples. So this might sound like a bit of a mess, but genuinely, like, it's not too bad. So I'm going to show you an effect. I can show you a couple things. So this is what I meant, right? Like, with how non-SpongeBob levels, like, can't really have effects. So I'm gonna go from 3K to BBBH, right? And you can see here, problematic bone count, 116. But then when I load into the level, it's just completely fine. Like, that's its own thing, a bone structure error. It doesn't really matter for what we're talking about today, but, in non-SpongeBob levels, if there were a bone count error, it just would have been, like, it was warning me in the middle of the load that there was a bone structure error. It would have remained there. The bone structure error would have remained. But because I warped to a SpongeBob level, it got written to SpongeBob's player model instead, which means no corruption. So bowl storage is still set up in BBBH. It is still the equivalent of if I did bowl storage in BBBH, but no effects can actually happen here. So that's something to keep in mind. Now here's another thing we're gonna do. So I'm in sandwich driving right now, so this chain is any level to SCDA Sponge Bowl to sandwich driving ring. So very specific. Because again, SCDA Sponge Bowl, we can't actually set up bowl storage in SCDA Sponge Bowl, so we need to go from any random level where we can set it up to SCDA Sponge Bowl. to sandwich driving. And the total load count from boot is currently 4, I believe. Is it 4? Give me a second. Yeah, I think we're on 4, so... Watch what happens now when I go... Well, this is load number 5. So from boot, 3K was the first load, SCDA Spongeball was the second load, and now I've done sandwich driving, sandwich driving, sandwich driving. That is what I've done, right? And nothing is different here. But then, watch what happens if I load again. I have activated an effect. And it's a bit of a messy one. It loaded multiple tasks at once. As a matter of fact, it reloaded sandwich driving's first task. Which, you know, we had never seen anything like this before. We have seen, like, loading multiple tasks at once. In this case, the main challenge and the Macho Time challenge have activated at the same time. Maybe the regular time challenge has as well, and the Macho one is, like, overriding it. I don't know. But, yeah, so we disabled Mindy's text boxes. Mindy is permanently disabled. And, it played the fly-through cutscene from SD-101. From the first task of SD-101. And you can see here, this token was originally, collected in the menu, and now it's gone. I couldn't be asked to, like, set up the effect because it would have taken ages, but if you do the same thing but with Mermaid Man, and I think it's like 21 loads, you'll get pretty much the same effect, except Mindy's clam will be gone, and the token will spawn on this platform, and we have reason to believe, obviously, that it's the first task's token, because that would just make logical sense. So it's either the ring challenge that's just, like, bugged out and the first task has just so happened to disappear, or the first task's token has disappeared because it has duplicated itself. This is why the best levels to test are sliding and driving levels. It is, well, not this specifically, but they are, like, you know, likely to have effects. They're likely to, you know, have something going on. You know, the big levels with, like, a lot going on, so you can get interesting effects like this. Because what you're gonna find in planned combat, you know what I mean? But this proves that we can theoretically duplicate tokens. Very, very, very high chance that what it did was unload and reload the first task. But we aren't done yet, right? So we're on a load count of 6. Now let's go to 7. No, well, other than Mindy being disabled, nothing has changed, right? And then if we load, this is 8 total loads. Once again, nothing has effectively changed. However, if we load the state, which again, this is on a load count of 4, I'm going to use a different non-SpongeBob level as a substitute right now, right? So, this is load 5. Effectively, because it's a non-SpongeBob level, as I described earlier. And now if we go back to sandwich driving, so this is load 6 just like before, but it offsets memory in the exact same way, and therefore the effect still kicks in. It's the exact same effect. Everything is identical to before. But now I've got to show you something else again. So that's a good thing, by the way. It's like, if the game... Actually, didn't I say this earlier? Well, no, I said it was save states, I think, but if... So let's say load 6 actually crashed. It didn't have an effect, it actually crashed. You'd just be able to substitute something else, for a different non-SpongeBob level. Doesn't really matter which one, but you can substitute a different one. And as long as it doesn't have its own crash, you can just... So I could have used 3K for the 3rd, 4th, and 5th load, if I wanted to. And if load number 6 crashes for sandwich driving, then I could, you know, I could do 6 loads. Load number 6 could be in 3K, and then load number 7 could be in sandwich driving. So that's how you'd... It is ideal, because obviously, especially driving levels, like, they take so long to load into. Like, they're big levels, and then Mindy talks to you, and it fades and everything. So it was just ideal to, you know, try and find something else. You know, plank combat generally works, although I don't think it likes SCDA Spongeball to plank combat, but you can try, like, Dennis, you know, any of the floating blocks, Frogfish, like, you can just test a lot of stuff. You can even test a different sliding and driving level in the meantime, if you wanted to. Just any, like, non-SpongeBob load. So, yeah, hold on, let me do this again. So we're on 4 loads, and now I gotta show you something else. So, 5, that was 5, this is 6. 7. And this is just gonna show, if a level has been affected by ball storage, you probably, I mean, maybe you want to reload like once, but generally you don't want to continue that chain because the level is permanently corrupted, right? Well, if it's something big like disabling Mindy, then yeah, it's just permanently altered the level. That is what it's done. So this is just showing, because again, keep in mind that load number 8, nothing was different, really, but watch what happens if I go to load number 8 now, that load number 6 hasn't done anything. The rock at the beginning of the level has disappeared. It is just gone. Like, the shadow is still here, but the collision is gone and everything. Oh, I forgot to specify with the notepad, by the way, that scene resets and deaths. Sometimes an effect won't kick in until you've, like, died, but that sometimes isn't worth testing depending on the level. Because, for example, other than, like, failing a ring challenge, in most driving levels, like, you can't really, like, quickly die, which is the issue. Like, for, like, Rock Slide, Rubber Dub, and Gas, like, those levels you can die very quickly, so it is actually worth testing deaths there for effects. But when it comes to, like, sandwich driving, it's like, what are you gonna do? Like drive around for, like, 2 minutes? Like, until you, like, fall into a pit or die from, like, a wrecking ball or TNT or something that just allows you to, you know, like, see something that will almost definitely just cause, like, a crash or no effect. Like, it's not really worth testing. Even if, like, there is an effect, like, what are you gonna find? Like, a stretched object? Like, at that point, it doesn't, like, matter, you know what I mean? So yeah, that was a good example of just testing and how save states can be important, and like how fast, incredibly fast these loads are. And again, it's important to keep in mind like load count of 4, because Mindy Skip, for example, fails every 4 loads, and we found another, not really worth getting into the other one, but there's like a speedrun trick that makes you unfortunately, like, have to set up ball storage, not because you get a ball storage effect, but because it's just a byproduct of having to, like, do the trick fast, which can cause Sundae driving to crash unless you're not on a multiple of 4, so that also matters. Like, it's just a bit, like, stupid, but yeah. So basically, well, I've gone over, like, nearly everything. I guess now we can just kind of... Well, I do want to show one more thing, actually. I'll be right back. Alright, I have returned. This isn't really, like... Well, this is the reason why I want to test the sliding and driving level. Generally. Here is a rock slide effect. So, Mindy just instantly rewarded us. Like, she just instantly rewarded us, as if we completed a task, even though we just loaded in. And then the game crashed. But this is a good proof of concept. This is with an outdated version of Zemu that has inaccurate, well, it's inaccurate. Unfortunately, when we started testing ball storage, Zemu was not actually accurate initially, but now it is. However, apparently, well, okay, I should say as well, the person who found ball storage, Fogey, yeah, they found ball storage, and then the person who helped us understand this significantly more, was Resin. So shoutouts to those two. But yeah, So I forget I think this was Dennis 2 to Rockslide times like 7 or something. But this is a good proof of concept, even though this didn't actually, like, this doesn't actually work on console, because it crashes on the 7th load, and then the 8th load just, like, doesn't do anything. It still is proof that we loaded into a level and Mindy just rewarded us for completing a challenge that we did not complete. Unfortunately, it was not a token, it was the beat your best time challenge, but still, this should still be, and Sky altered memory a bit to see what would happen if you, like, corrupted, like, Mindy's text boxes at the beginning of a sliding and driving level, and it would just reward you with a token. So there's, like, 2 theoretical ways in which Mindy can give us a token as soon as we load in, and then she'll just, like, try and load the next challenge, essentially. And I will say as well with this effect, again, we can't be certain because of, you know, inaccuracies. It only worked if you died. Like, if you loaded into the level, died, and then loaded into the level again. Like, there are some effects that only kick in because you were in that level and then reloaded that level, or in this case, died and reloaded. And you could say, well, I shouldn't substitute a floating, you know, a non-SpongeBob load then, but you should, because we've only had proof of 2 loads influencing each other in that sense. Like, for example, sandwich driving into sandwich driving, and then, like, that second sandwich driving has a unique effect. We have seen that. And in that case, yes, like, floating block to sandwich driving would then cause that to, like, not work. However, those are very rare, and again, you should only be using non-SpongeBob loads as a substitute for the target level if there's, like, a crash on the way. Like, if loads, like, 2 to 10 don't do anything in sandwich driving, and then load 11, like, has an effect, then you can still, you know, do any other substitute level until load 10, in which case you do it in sandwich driving, and then number 11 has an effect. Like, you would just know. Like, you're not gonna, like, accidentally, you know, not find something. You're just doing it to, like, substitute loads you've already sat through, essentially, so it's, like, fine. I guess another thing as well with that bone structure error, you would need to download a specific version of Zemu, but, it warns you about a bone structure error, and you can resolve it by pressing L3. The problem is that you shouldn't do that, though, because we still want to, like, document crashes and stuff. You should only do that if chaining non-important, non-SpongeBob loads. So, for example, if you were using, like, Frogfish as, like, a substitute load for loads you've already sat through in sandwich driving, then you would want to, like, then if it's warning you about a bone structure error and it's going to crash, or it has a good chance of crashing, then you press L3 to resolve the crash itself so that you can continue the chain. But sometimes the game just will crash during a load, sometimes it'll crash after talking to Mindy, sometimes it'll crash, like, partway through a level. Like, there's, like, specific crashes and stuff. But yeah, we're looking for mainly a sliding and driving effect that allows us to instantly skip a task. And there's a decent chance that if it's even possible, we may need to, like, die beforehand and then reload the level, but again, for some tasks, it's just too much to test something like that. But for, like, sliding levels, like, yeah, you should test that. Hopefully this isn't too, like, confusing. I don't really have much else to show other than the actual, like, spreadsheet. So now I want to go over, like, how you actually specify this stuff. So let's go to, like, let's go to Rockslide Time Redo. So you can see I put 28 total loads, 27 non-SB loads. And so the way that it works is this is Rockslide Time Challenge, where you warp to before Rockslide. So these are the levels that you would warp to, like, that you would have set a bowl storage in before Rockslide. So this one was Depression Combat to Rockslide. So I loaded a save file into Depression Combat, and then I loaded into Rockslide, right? So what it means by 27 non-SB loads is that the first load was Depression Combat, and then the remainder were Rockslide. So that's what it means by non-SB loads. And you can see that I put 13th, 16th, 24th, and 28th load crash after talking to Mindy. So again, some effects kick in instantly, but some effects don't even try to kick in until after you've talked to Mindy. So sometimes when you talk to Mindy, the game will fade. It'll like fade to black and then fade. Like it'll fade in, and then no, it'll fade out and then fade in. And during that black screen, there are actually a lot of crashes that occur there. So when I say crash after talking to Mindy, that's what I mean. And then you can see a bunch of other loads have a 0-second timer effect, which is, again, is an effect. But I made sure to specify, and you could say, well, why is that important? Again, it's to make sure that everybody's on the same page and testing everything and all that stuff. Like, if somebody puts an effect like, oh, like, I don't know, like, a Hans trigger, like, stopped, like, got deleted, that's important for us to know. Because then it's like, well, maybe multiple Hans triggers got deleted, like, let's explore that, let's, you know. Or if it's like, oh, I can't replicate this. And then we'd have to ask, well, like, did you use Zemu? Like, maybe Zemu actually is inaccurate after all. And, you know, it's just important for that kind of stuff. Trying to find more examples. 3K to Rock Slide. Second load crashes shortly after spawning in, so, like, I plopped onto the ground, and before the time challenge could even, like, the timers could even appear, it crashed. And as you can see, 5th, 9th, 15th, 20th, 22nd, you get the picture, crash after Hans grab, so I specified that. 10th, 14th, and 27th load crash when attempting to warp. Just trying to reload or trying to warp anywhere, it just instantly just fails. There's another one. Sometimes I'll word something as crash during. Yeah, here. That just means that it crashed during the load. I just didn't want to say, like, the 35th load crashed during the load, because I'm saying the word load twice. So, what I said earlier with sandwich driving, like, how do we actually, like, again, if you're still confused, is like, how do we apply that? Well, you warp, you begin anywhere you want, set up ball storage, go to SCDA sponge ball, and then you can either keep reloading sandwich driving. Oh wait, this is sandwich driving ring mermaid man. Here we go. So there's no crashes before load number 6. So you can just keep, if you're really confused, you can just do any level, SCDA sponge ball, and then sandwich driving, you know. Or you could do any other non-SpongeBob load as a substitute. But yeah, as you can see, I specified, like, which ones have the same effect. I tested 30 because that's about the maximum they want to test. Alright, I put 28, but apparently I wanted to do 30 for this one. It is important to specify this stuff because, like, imagine, like, you get lazy and then you just don't realize something, and then that thing could have led to a big time save or whatever, you know, it's like, yeah. So now, at the end of all this, it's like, what should I be testing? Like, I get, you know, mainly a sliding and driving level, but, like, which ones, and also, like, what other levels can I test? For Frogfish and Plank Combat and Dennis 1, there isn't really anything worth testing in those unless you can duplicate a token. It might also be possible to, like, make a token tangible before it actually, like you can, because the tokens are, like, invisible and deactivated, so there's no theoretical reason why you wouldn't just be able to, like, cause an effect that activates them immediately. But again, Frogfish don't have ball, Dennis 1 is already really fast, and Plank Combat is stupid fast. And so then the next best thing is, like, well, duplication. But if it works the same way as in sandwich driving, you probably wouldn't know until you beat their challenge. So if you are going to test that, it would only really be worth testing in floating blocks, which I've already tested. Again, I didn't try, like, starting on a 4th load, and I didn't try all the costumes, but I did test, like, you know. Oh, and in, I think, SCDA floating block, I literally, like, forgot to die. So it's possible that there's something there, but again, like, you know, for duplicating tokens, but maybe there's a token duplication for Plank Combat, but you probably wouldn't know until defeating the jellyfish, and then, like, the token appears afterwards. Like, you might not know until after that, and then, you know, and then for sliding and driving levels, just none of the first tasks until, well, I say Sunday driving onwards, but obviously Knucklehead, you can't really do much. like, because again, a lot of effects only kick in after talking to Mindy, like after you finish talking to Mindy, but you can't do that in Knucklehead if you don't have enough tokens. Still worth testing for all tokens in Hundo, but yeah. Like, Desc is like very resistant to effects for some reason. I don't know why. Right now I'm just testing rock slide stuff. So generally, it's like you generally want to test the second sliding and driving tasks of every level, except for like Rubber Dub. And then like pretty much every ring challenge. Yeah, I would say so. But again, some of those will only be affected by. And some of them you can't even like use plain sponge costume and blah blah blah. Hopefully I've gotten everything across. If I haven't, then feel free to ask questions. I don't even know if anybody will use this video, but I just wanted to get it out there. I hope people don't get discouraged by the length. I'm just a yapper. So, yeah. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.